In a moment, Jay Beeber joins us. We're going to talk about what they're trying to do to get us to stop driving our cars. Jay is next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Jay Beeber with us. First time as a dedicated champion of citizen empowerment and driving freedom. Dubbed the People's Lobbyist, Jay has been a key figure in eliminating abusive photo ticketing programs such as red light and speed cameras that have drained billions from our economy, impacting those least able to bear the burden, all without improving public safety. Now he's the executive director of policy at the National Motorists Association. He'll talk about that organization, leading a passionate team fighting the war on cars and advocating for drivers' rights across the 50 states. Jay, welcome. How are you, sir?
It is a pleasure to be with you, George. A long-time listener and really happy to be joining you for the first time.
I'm looking forward to this. When we open up the phone lines next hour, we have many truck drivers who are out there that will probably call you as well. Give us a little background on the National Motorists Association. What is that?
Well, the National Motorist Association started in the early 1980s to fight the 55-mile-per-hour national speed limit. I'm sure a number of people still remember that. Everybody was forced across the entire country to drive no faster than 55 miles an hour on major highways that were built for 80, 90 miles per hour. And people were getting a lot of tickets for just going, a reasonable speed on the roadway. And so we fought that fight, and we fought it until the mid-'90s when that was finally repealed. So if you like going more than 55 miles an hour on the highway, you can thank the National Motorist Association for that. We then branched out into other types of unfair traffic enforcement and traffic policies. So when we fight against things like automated enforcement, still unreasonable speed limits, and now some other threats to our driving freedoms, such as they want to now ban right turn on red, and they want to take away car lanes, and a whole bunch of other things like that. So that's what we do, and we're dedicated to fighting those and keeping everybody having the ability to drive their cars freely without unfair government intervention.
Is this a money grab, Jay? Why are they doing this to us?
Well, there's a couple of things. Now, part of it is a money grab. There's definitely, with the automated enforcement, all of those programs are simply revenue generation programs. They'll claim that it is a safety program, but every single program, save one, that I've seen in the entire country is predicated on the idea of making money. That's how the automated enforcement companies that run these cameras and run these systems sell the systems to the cities. They go in there, they tell them, hey, you know what, you're going to make a lot of money off of this. And then, of course, the politicians, they'll say, oh, we don't want to make any money. We hope we never have to give out another ticket ever again. However, as soon as the program starts losing money, if it does, they end the program. So that's the proof that really it's not about safety, it's about generating revenue. And that was definitely true of the red light camera program in Los Angeles. I know you have a lot of listeners from Los Angeles, and I was instrumental in removing that program from the city.
I was born in Detroit, and as you know, that's the automobile capital of the country. Yeah. And when the car sales went down, so does Detroit. What are they trying to do to us on cars?
Part of this whole thing is the idea that you have too much freedom, and because you have too much freedom, they want to curtail that. Now, they'll say that it's to help the environment, and they'll say that it's for safety reasons, but the real truth is that there is a movement in this country. It's been around for a long time. It's gained a lot of steam recently, but there's just people who feel that if you drive a car, if you live a middle-class lifestyle, that's not a good thing. You're too selfish. You really are taking up too much space on the planet, and you really don't need that much. You really shouldn't own anything. So they want you to get you out of your car. They want you on a bus. They want you on a bicycle, and they really just want to curtail your ability to get around. And quite frankly, the personal automobile has been the greatest driver of prosperity and freedom that this world has probably ever seen. It is an amazing, amazing invention that has freed up a huge amount of human capital, made us very, very prosperous, freed up a lot of people who were in poverty, and yet they want to go backwards. They want to take this away from us. And you mentioned the auto industry. This is really harming the auto industry. I'm actually surprised that folks in the auto industry aren't more upset about this or aren't more involved, because this is actually impacting their day-to-day lives and the potential for their jobs. Because if there's less driving, there's less need for cars, and that's an entire industry that props up, whether it's Detroit or other places in the country. People's livelihoods depend on this, and the government wants to artificially force you out of your car.
In our high school in Dearborn, Michigan, Ford Motor Company donated a driver's education program. They provided cars. They built a simulated lot where you could drive around. And we learned how to drive at 16, Jay, thanks to Ford Motor Company that way.
Right.
But I got to tell you, once I got my driver's license at that age, and the first time I was driving by myself, I felt like a big guy. I felt free.
You felt like a different person, I would imagine. I mean, I remember that, too. I couldn't wait to get my driver's license. It was nice to have your parents chauffeur you around, but at some point you want to be out on your own. You want to make your own decisions, and you don't want to have to rely on somebody else. You don't want to have to rely on public transportation or getting around by bicycle, which takes you 3 times or 4 times longer sometimes for really long distances, even longer than that. So really having a car is really having freedom. And there's been tons and tons of studies that have shown that for people who are in poverty, the best thing you can do to get them out of poverty is to get them a car if they don't have one. And it's a huge thing. And yet the folks that claim that they want to help poor people are the very same people that are trying to make it as difficult, as expensive, and as miserable as possible to drive your car.
How do you feel about electric versus gasoline? Does it matter to you?
Well, here's the thing. The National Motorist Association is very agnostic with regards to what type of vehicle you drive. We just feel that you should have a choice. So we are against the government putting its thumb on the scale and trying to force everybody into an electric vehicle. There's nothing wrong with electric vehicles. They're the right vehicle for some people in some situations. But, just as, some people would rather drive a Subaru and another person would rather drive a Toyota, in the same way, some people would like to, for their lifestyle, drive a vehicle that uses gasoline. They have longer distances. They need more power in certain vehicles. And so an electric vehicle isn't right for everybody, and because of that, we're against the government mandate. That's what we're against. And so we're in favor of freedom. That's what our entire organization is about. And we want you to have the freedom to drive an electric vehicle and the freedom to drive an internal combustion engine vehicle as well. Whatever is best for you, it's your life. You should decide that, not the government.
Jay, we're going to take a short break, but we shall be right back with Jay Beeber. We'll take calls next hour with him. His website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. We're talking about your rights to drive, folks, and chime in with us when we take calls next hour. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. George Norrie back with Jay Beeber from the National Motorists Association. Jay, that's going too slow on the freeway is dangerous. What about going way too fast?
Well, our freeways, the controlled access highways, the U.S. Interstate highway system, is actually built on the same model as the German Autobahn. So if you're a fairly competent driver and you're not weaving in and out of traffic, you can go reasonable speed. I mean, look at the speed limits around the country. In Utah, the same highway is 80 miles an hour as a speed limit, and in other parts of the country, the exact same design of a highway is sometimes 55 miles an hour or 50 or 60 miles an hour. So the speed limits on our highways are pretty arbitrary with regards to the jurisdiction that you're driving through. And so what we recommend in terms of how we set speed limits is something called the 85th percentile speed. That's the speed that 85% of the people don't exceed. It's the natural speed that everybody sort of congregates on the roadway. So the most dangerous thing actually is speed variation. That is, some people going much faster, some people going much slower. But if everybody's going about the same speed, that's been proven to be the most safe thing, even if that's a little faster than, say, what somebody arbitrarily stuck a speed limit on that particular roadway for.
There's nothing worse, though, than a driver doing 40 on the freeway.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's even worse if they're stuck in the left lane and refuse to move over. The National Motorist Association, one of the things we do in most years is we have what we call Lane Courtesy Month, and we try to encourage people, stay to the right, pass left, and leave that left lane open for the people that want to drive a reasonable speed on the roadway.
Now, some states have a high-speed lane, but you have to have more than one person in the car. Is that happening throughout the country?
Yeah, well, what they're doing is, they have carpool lanes. That has been proven not to be very successful. But what they're starting to do now is they're starting to have these lanes in which you have to pay to be in those lanes. There's nothing wrong with building a lane in which you have to pay for if that's an extra lane. The problem would be is if they took away a lane that we've already paid for with our tax dollars, and then made that a lane in which you had to pay for. So it depends on whether or not how you built the lane and how you've used that money, and whether you've used new money for that and added to capacity. But what we're seeing around the country is what they really want to do is they want to reduce capacity. They have this thing called road diets, and I don't know if anybody's heard that term before, but what that basically means is they want to take away car lanes because there's just too much car lane. You're going, it's too easy for you to get around, so they want to take away car lanes, and this is happening in a lot of cities. Los Angeles, New York City has done this, a lot of major cities, and sometimes in smaller places around the country, and it can lead to some very, very dangerous things that have happened. You probably have covered on your show the fire up in Paradise, California, when that happened.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happened there, a lot of people don't know this, is that they did a road diet in the middle of town on that roadway after they were told that the route out of town was already not safe. What they did was they took away a car lane, and a number of people, I think it was 80 some odd people, lost their lives in that, and part of that was because people couldn't get out in an area, in a mountainous area where there was only one route out, and they took away a car lane. And unfortunately, that's what some of this ideology leads to things that are much less safe, not more safe.
Jay, does your organization ever look at road rage?
It is something that we don't spend a lot of time on, but it's an interesting question. A lot of what's happening with road rage nowadays, I think, is people are very frustrated by the policies that are making their commutes and their ability to get around much more difficult. So they're stuck in traffic for no reason. They're frustrated by that. But, of course, we certainly can't condone anybody doing anything dangerous on the roadway or being unsafe to other people on the roadway. We think people need to be courteous. That's why we promote the lane courtesy, and people need to get along, and but people also need to be courteous. So if somebody wants to go a little faster, then you get out of their way. Don't try to block them intentionally.
And I'm convinced road rage occurs when a bad driver or inconsiderate driver does something to a person who's having a bad day.
Yeah, that's definitely what leads to this kind of thing. I mean, certainly, I think just everything in our society now is a little bit too close to the boiling point. So we really do need to kind of take a step back just overall. But we tend to, and this is more of a psychological thing, that we tend to ascribe bad motives to people when that may not be their intention. That guy cut me off. Well, maybe he just didn't see you, or he wasn't paying attention, or he's having a bad day.
He made a mistake.
Give people a little bit of grace. Yeah, he just made a mistake. I accidentally, a couple of weeks ago, I actually made a mistake, and unfortunately, I didn't quite cut somebody off, but somebody got mad at something that I did on the roadway, and they came after me and were driving like a maniac. That's not going to get you anywhere. That's not going to help you. You're going to hurt somebody. Don't do that. Just let it go, and don't be, don't put more people in danger because you can't just sort of say, well, maybe that person's having a bad day, or maybe that person just made a mistake. They weren't intending it towards me. Everybody takes things a little too personally these days, and we need to we need to have a little bit more grace to people, I think.
I try to go out of my way to help people. Somebody's trying to cut into traffic and they're stuck on the side. I'll slow down, let them go in. Or somebody or they put their turn signal on to change lanes. Nobody lets them in. I'll let them in.
Yeah, I do the same thing because you know what? Here's the thing. I want to treat people the way I would like to be treated on the roadway.
Exactly.
That's one of the things that we promote in our organization is sort of the golden rule. And, treat people the way you want to be treated on the roadway. Be courteous. If somebody's trying to merge, let them merge. It's only one car in front of you. Don't be a jerk about it, and just be nice to people. We'll all get along. We'll all get there much more safely and get there, in a reasonable amount of time. It's the things that we fight about are the unfair policies that the government is imposing on us, which leads to a lot of these behaviors because people are already frustrated because the government intentionally is creating traffic congestion, unfortunately, and that's going to make people a lot more angry because they sometimes have to be somewhere and they can't get there because somebody, some government official decided it was better for you to be on a bus and they want to make your commute a lot more difficult.
Jay, my mother is 95, lives in Detroit, and still drives.
Yeah.
And she was bragging today about how she drives. And I said, Mom, if I'm ever in Detroit and you're on the road, I'm getting off. But my mom is 91 and she still drives, so I'm thankful I still have her around. Does she do freeways? I don't think mine does freeways.
She tries to stay away from some of the higher speed roadways, and she, at 91 she doesn't drive as far as she used to, but she, she still goes to the grocery store. She still gets around, as go to her doctor's appointments, but certainly doesn't take those long trips that we used to take when I was a child. That's for sure.
What's going on with these bike lanes or these bikes, pedal bikes that are in the middle of the road?
Yeah, this is an interesting phenomenon. There is this push to have everybody be on a bicycle, and there is, unfortunately, a very militant, small part of our population that identifies as bicyclists. They see it as their identity, and they want everybody to be on a bicycle, and they want the roadways for themselves. Now, they'll say, oh, we just want to share the roadway, but what they want is at least half of the roadway. And if you look at the amount of people that use bicycles to get around, to commute, it's very small. I just saw a statistic from the Washington Post, and it said that the percent of U.S. commuters who usually make a trip by commuting is 0.5%. Now, it's bigger in some areas like Manhattan and some other areas, but overall in the U.S., it's 0.5%. It is basically the same in 2019 as it was, before the pandemic as it is now, and it's actually down from 2014. So, but what they're doing is they're taking away car lanes in order to give it over to bike lanes. And my wife and I have this joke whenever we do see, the rare occasion we see a bicyclist actually in a bike lane, we'll say, oh, there goes a unicorn.
Huh.
because they're so rare that we rarely ever see them. They say, well, if you build it, they will come. Well, unfortunately, they have spent billions of dollars around the country building out bike lanes, and the amount of bicycling has barely moved. It's barely moved, and it will never reach the amount that people drive by personal automobile, which is in close to 80% of people get around by personal automobile. And what's actually increasing, not just because of the pandemic, because this was happening before the pandemic, is that people working from home is way before the pandemic, way outnumbered the people that were traveling around by bicycle. And so we're never going to get people to switch to bicycles as a major form of transportation in this country, and it's a fool's errand, and we're making a lot of people miserable. We're making a lot of people poor because of it, and it's really a bad idea. And that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be bike lanes here and there, or that there shouldn't be places for people to bike if they need to, but the amount of bike lanes that they're putting in places in taking away car lanes as a result is a very, very, very poor policy.
And some of these bikers don't have reflectors or lights on their bikes, and they're pedaling in the pitch darkness.
Yes, in fact, the statistics show that the vast majority of pedestrian and bicyclist collisions and fatality occur in the dark because people can't see them.
You can't see them.
Unfortunately, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're right. You can't see them.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, there are a set of bicyclists who don't want to follow the rules of the road. They don't think the rules of the road apply to them, so they'll blow through a stop sign, or they'll blow through a traffic light, or they'll ride on the wrong side of the road, or cut in and out of traffic. Seen this all the time. But God forbid a driver in a car slowly rolls through a stop sign when nobody's around. They lose their minds because of this, and so they're really inconsistent and really hypocritical about this. So the rules don't apply to them, but everybody else has to follow the law exactly to the absolute letter of the law. And again, going back to what we were saying before, no grace for anybody else. Everybody else is a jerk, but you're perfect. So that seems to be their attitude.
Tell me you hate self-driving cars and trucks, because I do.
Yeah, there could be some benefits from that. Your mom, my mom, maybe a self-driving car is appropriate for them to get around. But the thing we're concerned about self-driving cars is the amount of control that the government potentially could have over our lives if, for example, they decided to force everybody into a self-driving car in the same way they want to force everybody into an electric vehicle. And what I mean by this is that no manufacturer will build a self-driving car that breaks the law. They can't. It's by its very nature.
Right.
So it's much easier to control the machine than it is to control the human being. So all they have to do is pass some ridiculous law, and then everybody, that car has to follow it. The human being inside that car will have no control over it. And I don't know, let's say, some crazy thing happens like a pandemic, and they decide everybody needs to stay home, or nobody can go to work, or nobody can go to certain parts.
No, they'd never do that to us,
that
would they?
Never happen. I know. That would never happen. But in the case that it did, if all of our cars were self-driving cars, all they would have to do is pass that law or pass that rule, not even a law. They probably just have to pass the rule, and the car will have to follow it, because the manufacturer of that car that makes the software for that, they will get in trouble if that car doesn't follow it. So that's the concern we have is how much freedom will you have left when that car is controlled by the government and that car is controlled by some giant tech company that may not like where you're going and decides, we're not going to take you there in our self-driving car because we don't agree with your life choices.
Or we're going to just simply shut the car down for a week and it won't move.
Yep. Exactly. And that's another thing that they want to do. There is, in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed a couple of years ago, there is a mandate for the government to come up with a plan for, now we call it a kill switch. They say it's for impaired driving, but of course it never stops at what they say that it's for. And so they want to have this switch in the car that the car either automatically or remotely can be shut off. And think about how dangerous that would be if the car makes a mistake. I mean, you've been reporting, over the last day or so on this CrowdStrike thing, this Microsoft thing, and just think, technology is not perfect. Okay, so there are always going to be false positives. So somebody gets in a car, and maybe somebody else is in the car who's impaired or whatever, and that car won't move. You will not be able to go where you need to go because the car mistakenly thinks that the driver is impaired. Or while your car is driving and you're in the middle of nowhere, think if you're a lone woman out there and the car makes a mistake, and now you're stranded somewhere. This is really dangerous technology that is not ripe for prime time, and we're very concerned about the fact that they're mandating that in 2025, 2026, they're supposed to have these rules, and this technology does not exist properly yet. Even if it did, it wouldn't be a good idea, but we're very concerned about this, and we've been talking to Congress. This is one of the things that the National Motorist Association does, is that we do talk to elected officials a lot, and we try to convince them and explain to them what the problems are for some of these ideas that sound good on paper, but when you get into the details of it, they're not a good idea, and they're oftentimes very dangerous.
Can people email you, Jay, through your website?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our website is motorists.org. Motorists is plural, and just go there or Google National Motorists Association. Will find us. They can contact me personally. They just put onto our contact form there and say, I have a question for or a message for Jay Beeber. You can reach me or any of our other staff that way.
All right, Jay, we're coming back to take an hour of phone calls with you in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back, George Norrie with you, Jay Beeber with us. Jay, how do you feel about cars that start or don't start with alcohol breathalyzers as their mechanism to start them?
Well, here's the thing. I mean,
that's a tough call.
Yeah, it's a tough call. We don't condone people drinking and driving. The level at which somebody is actually impaired and is a danger on the road, I think, is in somewhat of debate. But certainly, if we are going to use such a technology, it should really only be used for those people who have proven that they can't be trusted. I think is really the way that I would describe it. It's really something that
convicted DUI people or stuff like that.
Yeah, and maybe not just ones with a small amount or somebody that made a mistake. It was just a minor thing, but somebody who has proven that they're actually a danger on the road. We certainly don't want anybody to get hurt out there, and we certainly are not in the business of protecting people who are impaired drivers and get out on the road. So, that's what I would say about that.
What is a 15-minute city? What does that mean?
So a 15-minute city is this concept that everything that you would ever want will be within 15 minutes of a walk or a bicycle ride or maybe even a bus ride. But if you think about this concept, it's really not possible because, in a 15-minute radius, how are you able to have enough choice of restaurants? How are you able to have enough choice of dentists or cleaners that you want to go? You're going to basically have one choice. So what the idea is that they want everybody to live in a dense urban environment, no suburbia. You can get around by bicycle or bus. And if you want to go further than that 15-minute area by car, then you're going to be penalized for that. You're going to be charged more for that. They're going to make it much harder for you to do that. There are cities in Europe that are already doing it. They've divided the city into 7 sections, and you can't really go from one section of the city to the other without being penalized in some way. If you want to get to one part of the city by car, you have to go out on this outer ring and go around the city. It takes you a lot longer. So the idea, again, is to get you out of your car. That's what these are designed to do. They sound nice because they say, you'll just have everything you want right here. But, of course, they're the ones that are going to decide what it is you need and what you want, not you. And that's the big problem with 15-minute cities.
Jay, what did the New York governor just do?
Yeah, this is an interesting thing, and it may just be because it's an election year. We'll see what happens. But the city of New York was going to impose what they call congestion pricing, which means a tax on going to certain parts of Manhattan. A lot of areas surrounding states like New Jersey and even parts of Long Island, they were suing the city. And at the very last minute when this was supposed to start, the governor of New York decided that she was going to nix this program. Now, again, we don't know what's going to happen because it's an election year, so you really can't necessarily trust what the politicians do. We're hoping that they have seen the light and realized that this is really going to crush people and this is not the way to deal with traffic congestion and to deal with cities that are, small cities, small areas that are hard to get around by car. That's not the right way to do this, and to crush people with, a $15 or a $20 charge just to drive from one to drive to the lower part of Manhattan. That's not good. It's not good for people who need to do so. It's not good for commerce, and hopefully she saw the light. We'll see whether after the election, after November, whether or not this idea rears its ugly head again.
Would you say the National Motorists Association is making headway?
Absolutely. We have seen a reduction in a lot of places of certain kinds of automated enforcement programs because one of the things that we did, most people would not know this, but with red light cameras, for example, we mentioned them earlier in the show, and one of the things that was happening is that they were issuing a lot of tickets for fraction of a second violations, a blink of an eye, something you can't really even see with the naked eye. And a lot of that had to do with the yellow light time. And we were instrumental in getting certain organizations in certain states, California being one of them, to adopt a little bit more lenient standard with regards to the yellow light time to give people that extra added, we call that an engineering tolerance. And so when you see that even if you increase the yellow light time by even a fraction of a second, a half a second, sometimes the violations will go down by like 80%.
Wow.
So, yeah, and in California, that ticket is a $500 ticket. So that 80%, that makes a big difference for a lot of people. So we have been instrumental in these laws around the country. We're working on something in Ohio right now. There's a proposal to put cameras on school buses and ticket people who are passing a school bus when the lights are flashing. Now, again, we're not in favor of people doing something dangerous, but those types of tickets that type of situation is very confusing for people sometimes, and the tickets are being issued for people who pass the school bus right when those lights start flashing and not when the kids are actually getting on and off the bus. So we're having, we're seeing that's a problem, and we're working with the folks in Ohio on that issue.
I noticed in California, too, Jay, that they'll let a couple cars go through a red light on their left-hand turns.
Yeah, I mean, well, the law is that if you cross what we call the limit line, that's either the first line of the crosswalk or there's actually a painted line. If you cross that and you're in the intersection when the light turns red, you're allowed to keep going. So what people will do is they'll pull up into the intersection, just wait for that traffic to clear, for that light to turn, and then they'll turn after that light changes when it's clear. But that's not illegal. That is certainly permitted in terms of the law.
Let's go to the phone. Scott's with us in San Luis Obispo, California. Hey, Scotty, go ahead.
Hello, George. Hello, Jay. I got a comment, George, and then I'll ask a question.
Sure.
So I just heard you brought up the question about bike lanes. Here in San Luis Obispo, California, we've had many roads that have been removed for bike lanes. And in fact, the city council is trying to get 20% because they claim when they get the 20% of the roads moved, they claim that the bicyclists will use them. Unfortunately, 3 years in, we don't see the bike lanes being used at all. So, and the fact in California, they're using Measure G. It's called Measure G money. So it's basically grant money. And maybe you've seen this in California too, George. But the fact is it's killing business. Our town in San Luis Obispo, we've had tremendous amount of store closures. Even after COVID, I mean, things are supposed to be back up and going again, but the bike lanes are put all over the town, and they eliminated parking for it. And the businesses are speaking out for it, but the city council doesn't listen. It's almost like the city council is being instructed to go this path of either this 15-minute city agenda or something else, but it doesn't make any economic sense. So that's my comment. I guess my question is that what happens? The fact is they don't have the money, and they're using this grant money. Eventually, where do they come to a point where they have to reverse engineer all these roads that have been converted into bike lanes? Because what I'm seeing is that these bike lanes, they're taking, like, for example, let's say you have a road that has 2 lanes and 2 lanes. 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other. There's a bike lane on both sides. What they're doing is they are taking 1 lane out on both sides, where there's already bike lanes on both sides, but they're putting like flower pots, and they're putting things that don't make any economic sense as far as travel. And this is happening not just in San Luis Obispo, but it's happening in Santa Barbara, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, Stockton, and I'm just like, this is nuts. So I guess my question is it 15-minute city logic, or is it something else other than trying to remove the car? Because I don't see the economic sense, Jay. Maybe you can fill in the blank here.
Yeah, I mean, this is really more of an ideological thing than any logical choice. And we have seen this. We saw this in Los Angeles with bike lanes on Venice Boulevard. They did a road diet, and they put in bike lanes, and a whole bunch of businesses were put out of business. And unfortunately, some of the elected officials are not getting the message that this is not what people want, and it really takes folks to really stand up to the elected officials, maybe even vote them out of office. But join with the National Motorist Association. We can help out in these situations, and try to give some information on how to fight back against these policies, because they're detrimental to just the average person trying to get around, and they're very, very detrimental to the businesses in these areas. Of course, they claim, it's better for businesses if there's bike lanes, but it doesn't generally work out that way.
Good point. Jerry in Iowa, take it away. Hi, Jerry.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm hoping to hear your comments on my comments. I am hoping for a return to the golden age of car creativity. Today, we have all these vehicles going down the road. They all look like they're stamped out of the same thing. I mean, there's some variation. But there's an elderly lady in our town who has a museum, and there's this 5 decades of all these old cars. There's Bearcats, Suburbans, Rolls-Royce, hippie vans. There's a Playboy bunny car that's like only 500 made, stuff like that. And there's just all this. I'm just hoping that through the chaos of the world, that somehow maybe some states will deregulate so much that there could be cars that are so varied. Some have computers, some don't. Top down. Everything imaginable. It just seems like everything is so heavily regulated. Is it possible, do you think, in the future that we could return to just random, experimental, artistic, creative world of transportation that isn't so monotonic? I'm just really hoping that can really happen through, and maybe some unfortunate chaos could yield unexpected deregulation.
Yeah, I think my answer to that is it would be nice, but unfortunately, I don't see us moving in that direction. I see us moving in the opposite direction, which is more and more regulation, whether it's environmental regulations or safety regulations. I mean, one of the reasons that we have larger vehicles on the roadways now is because of the government intervention in the market, and there's a lot of unintended consequences when the government gets involved. So, I would like to think that it would be, we get a return more to kind of a market-based idea, and people can try different things. But I have to be honest with you, we're trying to keep our finger in the dike at this point, trying to stop all the terrible things they want to do to us. I don't know how much possibility there would be to kind of go back to the golden age, but it would be nice, and certainly that's one of the things that we would like to see happen.
Next up, let's go to Mayat in the city of New York. Hey, Mayat.
Yes, good morning. Such an excellent program. And, Jay, I love your work. It sounds like you were talking about what was referred to a few years ago with Rosa Corey as Agenda 21. And, your 15-minute city. But I have a couple of brief stories in terms of transport, and then about a two-part question. And, Jay, I prefer to listen over the air. First, when I grew up, I guess it was in another era. My parents were master bridge champions, particularly renowned for the, what they call that, the Team of Four, written up in all the black newspapers around the country and the New York Times et al. And I remember that truckers, the way my parents spoke of truckers, because if there was any kind of a breakdown or problem, they were always there, and I got a very high opinion. Now, the other part of it is these bikers, especially in New York City, there's a radio host that's about 90, and he has all kinds of stories. I particularly call on God is Divine, because when they're coming up behind you, you have no way. They don't know whether you're going to step to the left or right. And I'm petite and always been delicate, and they are scary. We also have all these lithium batteries. I think I heard a report today that there were 600 fires in the last 3 or so years, number deaths and number injuries. So I like some of your thoughts on that. But the main part of my question has to do with some time ago, I'd like to know how it came about that someone or someone's decided that to take AM radio out of cars. I mean, I listen to WOR and not much AM radio, especially in these fraud times. But I'd like to know more about that and how that came about even and the current update. The last part of it is have you ever thought about there are some communities that are over-police, over-surveilled. So one of the changes being called for because there are just so many instances where what was to be a routine police stop, traffic stop, and there was some young man, I can't even remember all the names, but he was beaten to his death just a few blocks from his home. I forget where it was, but there's so many instances. And if you have my questions, George usually helps out. He's such a sweetie. I'll listen over the air. Thank you.
Let me address the AMJ. First of all, it was a cost-cutting move to try to get AM radio out of cars. It's not working. AM is still in car radios. They're still manufacturing AM radios, and I hope we stay.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, look, we're actually working with Congress. Again, this is another one of the things that we're working on. It's why an organization like the National Motorist Association is so important. We're the only people working in this space, across the board. There's certainly other groups that want to keep AM radio, but we're in the fight too to try to keep this. We've talked to members of Congress. We're hoping that maybe in the next year or so that there'll be a new transportation bill, and this will be part of that transportation bill, which is to require not really a lot in favor of government requiring things, but AM radio. A lot of people rely on this, and this is where people get their news. It's where they get their entertainment a lot of times, and a lot of people's livelihood depend on this. And if that goes away, it's going to be a really, really, really bad thing for our country. And so we've been working on that, trying to make sure that doesn't happen. I'd like to address the other question, which is the sort of the police question, and this is actually a really interesting thing that we've been working on, and it's a really smart question because a lot of things that are imposed that sound good in terms of, say, a traffic safety thing is actually really detrimental to certain members of our society, certain parts of our society that are over-policed. And we work with a lot of organizations that work on these issues. And what we've tried to explain to people is that these policies, like, for example, the way New York is going right now, which is, they want to lower all the speed limits in the city to some ridiculous number. And, or, places around the country, they want to go to, 20 miles an hour in major cities, throughout the entire city. Or New York is talking about 10 or 15 miles an hour. And what this does is it creates just more opportunity for policing. And so, again, a lot of the people who are in favor of these policies say they're in favor of protecting these groups, and yet they want to impose policies that make it more likely that these people will be pulled over by the police, and negative things can happen. Interaction with the police oftentimes is not the best thing, and so we definitely work on these issues and try to explain how these policies can be really negative to certain communities.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and come back with final calls. And welcome back, George and Ori, along with Jay Beeber, as we talk about protecting your motorist rights. Where does this all head, Jay, in the next 5-10 years? What do you think?
Well, I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to turn the tide on some of these things. You asked me in the last segment how we were doing on some of these things, and I think we're making some headway. The more that we have the resources to get out there and talk to elected officials, talk to the public, get the public involved in fighting for some of these rights and making sure that our freedoms don't go away, the more successful we're going to be And I'm hopeful that we're gonna be successful on a lot of these things. Sometimes it's one step forward and two steps back, but we're hoping to take two steps forward and try to make a big difference here.
Let's go back to the calls west of the Rockies. Ray's with us in Torrance, California. Hey, Ray, go ahead.
Hey, guys. How you guys doing tonight?
All good.
Good. Thanks for taking my call. So I have kind of two parts to this. Like, Can this be reversed? The city of Carson has taken upon itself to create this whole Agenda 21 housing where they took away 2 lanes running east and west. They turned this thing into a planter. They got a bike lane going on. Then they built that stackable nameless and faceless housing. So the idea, you take the bike, the bus, you get stuck in this road diet, you can't get out, and you get frustrated. Your foot hurts on the brake pedal for more than a period of time. So in that environment, they're in hopes of you live upstairs and go down and work at your corporate job downstairs. So that seems like that cannot be reversed. What they did when they ripped out arterial highways all over Los Angeles, Mar Vista, Venice, a lot of parts of the inner city, all the way to Riverside, San Diego, to Tahunga, it's all over the place. And, it just creates a traffic nightmare. There's these hideous-looking poles everywhere. There's bike lanes that nobody's even riding on. A lot of these towns, people are getting frustrated. They're just running these poles over. So it's basically a waste of time, a waste of money. It just doesn't make sense what they're trying to do. But me being a professional driver, it's probably taken me double the time to get to these accounts. I can see my account, but I can't get to it because I'm stuck in a single-lane highway. And it's just so frustrating. I talked to a city councilman that took $11 million from the road repair fund and put up the road diet in Mar Vista, West LA. When I tried to have a conversation with him, he pulls his phone out like he's going to call the police on me. And I was just trying to have a civil conversation with him. So this form of control is in our face, and hopefully we can reverse a lot of this. And I will be looking at your website there to be able to help with signatures and to try to get some of this stuff reversed, and also, help with funding to be able to help reverse all this stuff.
All right. Well, your thoughts, Jay?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I know exactly what he's talking about because I used to live in L.A., so I'm familiar with the councilman that he's talking about who's no longer in office. And one of the things that I'm assuming it's the same person I'm thinking of. And, one of the reasons I think that he didn't run for re-election is because of the pushback he got from a lot of these things. But, talking about whether these things can be reversed, Culver City, same area basically. During the pandemic, they had 3 lanes on Culver Boulevard that went through the center of town and through the shopping district. And they took away 2 lanes, one for a bike lane, one for a bus lane, and left 1 lane in each direction. Now, think about that. I mean, it makes no sense to leave 1 of 3 lanes. So taking away 2/3 of the lanes that were used for cars for other things that aren't as used as much. And the people revolted, and they had to reverse some of this. They didn't go completely back to 3 full lanes. I think they ended up with 2 car lanes and 1 combination bike and bus lane. But, when the people get involved, you can make a difference. And elected officials, the most thing that they care about is getting reelected or getting elected to their next position. So especially during an election time, which is what we're in right now, start talking to these people that are running for office because you want to know what positions they have on some of these things. A lot of what he was talking about with the road diets and all this is something called Vision Zero. So you'll hear this term, and what this is this crazy idea that nobody will ever die in a traffic accident ever again, and that somehow we can create this utopia where no one ever dies ever again. And think about what you would have to do to the system, how you would have to impair the system in order to get to that point. And this is the analogy I make. A lot of people die every year from falling off ladders. Now, we can stop that from happening. We can get to 0 deaths if we just make ladders 1 foot tall. So,
or illegal.
Same idea. I'm sorry, was that?
Or make them illegal.
Or make them illegal, exactly. So, or you can just outlaw ladders. So, but think about the fact that what you do is you get to a certain point where the thing no longer functions. And that's what they want to get to because they don't want you in a car. if you think about these policies, when you look at them on the street or you're out there and you're thinking about them and you go, this just doesn't make any sense. And I think you said that a couple of times. And it does make perfect sense. If you understand that the goal is to make driving as miserable, as difficult, and as expensive as possible, then everything they're doing makes perfect sense. But that's why the people have to rise up and they have to say, no more, we're not going to put up with this, and we're not going to vote for you, and we're going to make your lives miserable respectfully, but we're going to make your lives miserable if you don't reverse these policies. And that's what people have to do, because that's the only thing they're going to listen to.
Back to the phones. Let's go to John in Wisconsin. Hey, John, go ahead.
Hello, George. Hello, Jay.
Hey, John.
I have several brief comments that lead to a question, please. Jay, I am so thankful for the National Motorist Association. I can remember, just like it was yesterday, when the speed limit was reduced to 55 miles an hour. Shortly after that mandate, I traveled with my parents from our home in Milwaukee to my aunt and uncle's home in Chicago. It's a 90-mile drive. My father, who always followed the rules, kept the speedometer at 55 the entire trip. My father was also a successful businessman. And when we arrived in Chicago, he said, John, this is not good for people that make a living, whether it's the truckers, delivery people, or whatever. He says this is going to choke a huge segment of our business, which segues to my question, Jay. I have an opinion, and I wanted to see if my thoughts make sense to you. I believe that these people who get involved in putting these regulations on us, these mandates, all these government things that take away our rights and our freedom, first of all, I don't think those people have any common sense. Second, I think those people are not comfortable in their own skin, and they get some type of mental reward by seeing other people get strangled, and it gives them power. It's a huge problem in our culture, Jay. I am so thankful for your organization, so thankful for your voice. So those are my comments and questions. And, George, thank you for taking my call.
Sure thing, John. Go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. By the way, the National Motorist Association is based in Wisconsin, so we're in your state. I don't live there, but that's where the organization is based. And yes, the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit was a huge detriment to this country, and we're glad that with the help of the people, we were able to reverse that. And I think you're absolutely right about where a lot of this is coming from. There is, unfortunately, in certain people, a very authoritarian nature. They think they know how to live your life better than you know how to live your life. And they, some of them are well-intended, but they get a kick out of telling people what to do. And, I'm somebody I'm very clear about this in my life, that you know how to live your life better than I know how to live your life, and I know how to live my life better than you know how to live my life. And as long as we don't hurt anybody, we should just leave everybody alone and just let everybody get on with their lives. But there are some people that just can't have that. And there's something that I say all the time. It's just a little phrase. It's called the somebody's getting away with something syndrome. And it's like just something that just sticks in people's clothes. Somebody's getting away with something. And it bothers them, and they lose sleep over it, and they just have to control everything. And that's why our organization is based, our mantra over and over and over again is freedom of choice. We don't want to tell you what to do. We don't want to tell you how to live your life. We just want to make sure that you have the freedom to do so.
Let's go to Thomas in Charlotte, North Carolina, east of the Rockies. Hey, Tom, go ahead.
Hey, George, I want to tell you I really listen to you every night, and I love your show.
Thank you, sir.
And I appreciate you so much. And I heard Jay talk. How you doing, Jay? I heard you talking about the self-driving car, which deals with technology. And I noticed we're talking about a lot of freedom and control tonight. And my question to you, Jay, and it goes back to George, too, and I want to hear what you got to say. This deals with technology. If someone gave you, Jay, a beautiful golden chain and said, Jay, this golden chain is for you, but in order for you to receive it, it must be wrapped around both wrists. That's the question to you, Jay, and George, you can answer too after Jay. That's my question.
I can give you a short answer to that. Freedom is a benefit unto itself, and there's no amount of restraint that you can put on the human spirit that people aren't going to push back against. And so I think my answer to you is pretty obvious, which is, there's no amount of money that will get me to give up my freedom, no amount of gold, no amount of silver, no amount of promises of safety that's going to allow me and prompt me to give up my freedoms and my God-given rights. And I hope that a lot of the people that are listening out there feel the same way. I know they do. And that's why we have to push back against these things.
To get the bracelet, I'd have it put around my producer's arms. That's the way to do it. Thank you, Thomas. Appreciate it. Michael in Burbank, California. Hey, Michael, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when all the truckers were considered the best drivers on the road. My dad used to call them knights of the road. But the thing about the AM radio, that AM radio is where you can actually hear conservative programs from numerous people and experts, such as your show. And the important thing is that when you have call-in, you have American citizens from every state in the union, and they're calling with opinions, and we're allowed to hear what we all think as an input. Now, you look at the TV, it's all nonsense, brainwash, a bunch of imbeciles. So a few years back when they started this, it doesn't have anything to do with money. They don't want the communication among the American people. So like your shows and the conservative shows that are on, the people learn. Now, the gentleman who got rid of those red light cameras, well, it came out in the paper that the corporations that were running them, they were getting the lion's share of the money. And it was an absolute ripoff, and the people really got angry with that, and they got rid of them. But like I say, your venues, where you have the American people able to call at night, and millions of people hear these ideas and what's going on, they want to shut it down. And when you talk about freedom on the road, this country was formed that there would be complete interstate freedom of travel and commerce for the citizens. And I think they want to get rid of that too. Thank you for taking my call.
Michael's got a great perspective there, Jay.
Yeah, he certainly does, and I appreciate the shout out for getting rid of the red light cameras in Los Angeles. And also the thing about the truckers, I don't think people realize this, that the truckers that are out on the road, I know there are a lot that are listening right now, they're the lifeblood of this country to a large extent. A lot of your goods and a lot of the fact that you have less expensive goods is as a result of the truckers that are out there day and night doing their job, getting you what you need. And so, we should give a huge thanks to the truckers and understand that, they're under a lot of pressure and a lot of threat in terms of their livelihoods as well. And yeah, look, I think the thing is that people just have to recognize what's going on. That's part of our job, to let people know what's happening out there so they can join together, they can join with us, and, we can make sure that we protect your ability to get around using your personal automobile.
So true about truck drivers, whether they're independents working for companies or part of the Teamsters Union. They are keeping America moving.
That's for sure.
Catherine in Canada, real quick. Catherine, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up the part things about me. It's hard to get parts for my car. It's only an 07. The fellow that had it before me, he didn't drive it. It was brand new. So that's my thought, thinking that's how they're just going to close this way down. Just don't give us any parts for our cars. Thank you.
Well, you may have a point there, but the automobile industry wants to keep making the cars. They're not for this.
Yeah, well, we would like a little more help from them as well, to be quite honest. But let's not give the powers that be any ideas to try to restrict the parts for the cars, because cars are expensive enough as they are, and they're making it more difficult for people to afford cars. And again, that's all part of the plan.
Jay, keep doing what you're doing, my friend.
Thank you.
Jay Beeber, he's doing a remarkable job with his organization, the National Motorists Association.